Fearless, Charles Blakesly Hall on WEIU TV is supported by the Southeastern Illinois Community Foundation and the Lumpkin Family Foundation.
In March 1941, the 99th Pursuit Squadron, the first all-black squadron, was activated at Chanute Field in Rantoul, Illinois. Ground crews received training at Chanute Field, while aviation cadets were trained in Tuskegee, Alabama. Among the pilots of the 99th was a young black man from Brazil, Indiana, named Charles Blakesly Hall. We now know the men of the 99th and the trainees that followed as the Tuskegee Airmen, and Charles Blakesly Hall was the most well-known Tuskegee Airman of his day.
Where he came from and that achievement to get to the top of that category of a fighter pilot, and especially one that shot down an enemy, is quite an accomplishment, considering how difficult that would have been for someone of his race.
As a pilot, he's making it better for the Air Force. You know, he's part of the roots of the people that were accomplishing a lot. I mean, it's amazing what our pilots did. And, you know, ground force, everybody else, not to exclude him, but he was one part of the team that turned around and excelled. And, you know, he didn't turn around and lay down any obstacles he had. He never talked about them if he did, that we've ever known of. And he just turned around and did the job and did it well to represent the country.
I revere people like Charles Blakesly Hall because the decisions that he made in his life affects my life, right? You know, how they say, he walked so I could run. And so he came to Eastern and he opened up doors for other individuals that look like me and him to come to Eastern Illinois University, to be students here, to be athletes, and to pivot if they want to pivot before graduating, right? And we know we have a lot of students that things in life happen and they have to pivot, or they just want to pivot because they've had their aha moment and figured out what they want to do with their life and how they want to make an impact. And so I definitely revere Charles Blakesly Hall for all that he has done here at Eastern Illinois University, but also for the world as well. He was able to show excellence on a scale that had not been shown before.
Charles Blakesly Hall was born to Frank and Anna Blakesly Hall in Brazil, Indiana on August 25, 1920. Frank found work in a lumber yard in Brazil and Anna was a housewife. Charles had one sibling, an older sister named Victoria.
His parents moved north to escape the Jim Crow South in the Great Migration and settled here. As far as growing up here, we know the street he was born on, Columbia Street, and where their family lived.
So he came from an area that we've been told is referred to as String Town. Can you shed any light on that?
It's an area of town that was sort of like on the outskirts, and a lot of other people were successful from that area. It was just a poorer part of town. And so they called them shotgun houses, whereas they say you open the front door and the back door, you could shoot a shotgun through it. So it's just a small housing. nice area for people getting a start. That's where they would live to work at the coal mines or other areas of the community.
Charlie, as his family called him, was described as a modest, unassuming, and unspoiled young man who was a credit to his community. He attended Brazil High School, where he was a standout on the football and track teams. Charles's classmate, Warren D. Williams, would later say that Charles was a shy, quiet young man with the body of Charles Atlas who gave 110% all of the time. In 1936, Harry Sockler, a graduate of Eastern Illinois State Teachers College in Charleston, Illinois, was hired as the football coach at Brazil High School. Sockler began encouraging some of the young men at the high school to go to Eastern, and one of those young men was Charlie Hall. Eastern allowed students to attend without tuition if they agreed to teach in an Illinois school for a period of time equal to attendance, and offered a limited number of scholarships to each established school with less than 1,000 students. A scholarship, such as those offered by Eastern Illinois Teachers College, was probably a necessity for Charles Hall. Charles Hall enrolled at Eastern Illinois Teachers College in the fall quarter of 1938. He was one of the first black students to attend Eastern. He listed his major as physical education, but the medical field was his ultimate goal. Eastern's student-led news organization, the Eastern Teachers News, later reported that Charles was one of 60 men to report to Coach Ave for football equipment that September, and that he was working towards the day he would become a doctor. Charles played football and ran track at Sharer Field, Eastern's original football field. Football section in the Eastern yearbook for that year referred to him as a fast and flashy freshman. As a halfback on the football team, and as a member of the track and field team, Charles Blakesly Hall became the first black athlete at Eastern. So before Charles B. Hall made a name for himself with the 99th Fighter Squadron, he enrolled at Eastern Illinois Teachers College, where he was the only black student on campus, and he was the first black athlete at Eastern. Talk about what that means, how that might have felt for him personally, and what that means to the generations of minority students who have attended Eastern after him.
Okay. I think for Charles Blakesly Hall, I think that being the only black student on campus, as well as the only black athlete, or first black athlete here at Eastern Illinois University, the pressure, definitely the pressure of that was there. He was probably used to being one of the only in the room. And I know there was a lot of pressure on him to be successful as a student, to be successful as an athlete, to be successful as a positive role model, as well as citizen of Charleston, Illinois. So I know it was a lot of pressure, but as we know, he was up for the challenge to be successful in all of the endeavors that he went after in life.
In January 1941, the War Department announced the formation of an all-black 99th Pursuit Squadron. On March 22, 1941, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was activated at Chanute Field in Rantoul, Illinois, just 70 miles north of Charleston. A month later, Charlie Hall dropped out of school, telling the registrar's office he was going to join the Army. Given the racism in this country at the time, Charles had to know that despite the step forward that appeared to be, there would still be people who believed it would fail and that the work would not be easy. There was a tremendous chance for accomplishment, but there would be so much riding on his shoulders. Can you tell us what that decision might have meant to a young man of color working his way through college in 1941?
I think Charles Blakesly Hall was made for a time such as this. And I say that because he had already been the only black student at EIU, as well as the first black athlete. So he was used to the pressure that came with that. And I believe when this opportunity came to him, he probably thought, you know what, I'm already used to the pressures that this world has put on me. And I think that this opportunity can be way more impactful, not only for my country, but for my race of people at this time, at that time in history. He wanted to be able to show that Black people in this country could be excellent. Black people are smart. Black people can achieve things that others thought that they could not achieve. And so I think that he definitely really rose to the occasion because he was already successful under pressure as being the only Black student here at the time.
Charles Hall enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps as an aviation cadet. He was called up in November and sworn in on November 12, 1941. Charles had never even been on a plane. Charles Hall was sent to the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama for training. The cadets were given the same flight school coursework as their white counterparts at other bases, but they felt the constant pressure of the exacting standards placed upon them by white military leaders who expected them to fail. Cadets had to pass primary, basic, and advanced flying training. Each section was about 9 weeks long. Graduates would then proceed to transition training to learn to fly specific aircraft for the war effort.
Young men that were flying those planes in World War II, it's amazing that here they were basically in their late teens and early 20s and flying a very complex, high-performance aircraft in battle with somebody shooting at them. It's just amazing in my mind to think about that. I used to fly at one time, but not at that level, and how difficult it was to fly those airplanes. So they had to be very brave.
While in training, Charles earned the nickname Seabuster from the men of the 99th. Charles Hall graduated with the 4th class out of Tuskegee on July 3, 1942, and was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant. A combined 12 men graduated in the first 3 classes. There were 14 men in the 4th class. Those 26 men, along with their ground support crews, formed the 99th Fighter Squadron. While back home in Indiana on leave in December 1942, Charles Hall married his longtime sweetheart, Miss Maxine Parrish from Terre Haute, Indiana. The 99th Fighter Squadron was trained and ready, but languished at Tuskegee for 9 months without deploying into combat. As the first all-Black unit, the U.S. Army had trouble finding a fighter group to accept them. Tuskegee's commanding officer, Colonel Noel Parrish, made frequent trips to Washington, D.C., inquiring as to why a fully trained fighter squadron was sitting at Tuskegee when there was a war on. Parrish had replaced the first commanding officer, who was not supportive of the idea of Black pilots. Upon taking command, Parrish, who was white, removed all of the whites only and colored only signs and made every effort to see that the trainees were treated with dignity and received the best training, the same training that other aviation cadets received. Parrish was held in such high regard by the men at Tuskegee, they later created the Brigadier General Noel F. Parrish Award. Parrish's efforts finally produced results, and in April 1943, the 99th Fighter Squadron boarded the SS Mariposa and headed to North Africa. They were the first all-Black unit to deploy into combat. Fighter squadrons were normally attached to a fighter group made up of 3 to 4 squadrons. The 99th deployed alone, unattached to any group. We now know these men today as Tuskegee Airmen, but during World War II and the 5 decades that followed, they were known as the 99th Fighter Squadron or the Negro Squadron. Because they deployed alone, the men of the 99th referred to themselves as the Lonely Eagles. The 99th remained in North Africa for maneuvers and training for a month, and then a month later were attached to the 33rd Fighter Group with the 12th Air Force in Tunisia. The 33rd's commanding officer was Colonel William Spike Momeyer. Momeyer was very prejudiced and looked for any way he could to discredit the 99th. Although trained, the men of the 99th had yet to receive combat training, something Momeyer's squadrons were reluctant to do. It was Colonel Philip Cochran with the 12th Air Force Training Command that stepped into that breach. Cochran provided the 99th with combat training, focusing on dive bombing and strafing techniques. Cochran, who was white, insisted they get proper training. The men of the 99th, including Charles, later remarked how Cochran welcomed them and never cared about color. Charles later mentioned Cochran as being a great influence. Training Black pilots was considered to be an experiment for many in the U.S. military, and men like Momeyer seemed determined to see that it failed. The men of the 99th Fighter Squadron, and later the 332nd Fighter Group and the 477th Bombardment Group, who all trained at Tuskegee, felt that pressure. Training was often harder for these men, and they understood that they had to work twice as hard because their success or failure would reflect on their entire race. By June 1943, the 99th began supporting Operation Corkscrew, the attack on Pantelleria Island's coastal forts and fortified airfield. On June 2, 1943, First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall and First Lieutenant William Campbell were the first men of the 99th to fly into combat as they took to the air over Pantelleria. 3 additional men of the 99th also flew into combat over Pantelleria later in the day. On the morning of July 2, 1943, First Lieutenant Charles Hall and his squadron were escorting medium bombers on a raid over the Castelvetrano airfield in southwestern Sicily. A mixed formation of German fighters approached, some engaging in a short dogfight. 2 enemy fighters appeared above the bombers, and Charles Hall turned into the attack to protect them.
I saw 2 Focke-Wulfs following the Mitchells just after the bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between the fighters and the bombers and managed to turn inside the Jerries. I fired a long burst and saw my tracers penetrate the second aircraft. He was turning to the left, but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. I followed him down and saw him crash. He raised a big cloud of dust.
Hall shot down one of the planes, a German Focke-Wulf FW-190, becoming the first black combat fighter pilot in American military history to shoot down an enemy plane. After the attack, Hall was separated from the rest of his unit. Enemy fighters dogged him for about 20 minutes and then gave up. When Hall's plane touched down, the ground crews erupted in cheers, and Charles was given the last chilled bottle of Coca-Cola on the airfield as his reward.
Coca-Cola was in short supply during World War II, so his reward for shooting down a German aircraft was a Coca-Cola. So I mean, we take that for granted in our modern day society. If we want a Coke, we just get it. But that was his reward.
You know, the picture of him shaking hands with Eisenhower,
Yes.
that's a great picture, and that accomplishment, that proves it right there, that he got the attention of General Eisenhower for his accomplishment. And that, I think, in itself, you know, of course, as the war went on, there were other African-American pilots who shot down enemy aircraft, but him being the first. And flying, you know, as that progressed in the Red Tails, then they were put in the P-51 Mustang. You know, Charles got his kill in a P-40 Warhawk, which was not the first class airplane, a fighter during World War II. And that's still another accomplishment.
Charles Hall's name and the tales of his accomplishments were carried in newspapers across America, and the black press praised him for his heroic feat and for blasting away the negative stereotypes. Lieutenant Charles B. Hall of Brazil, Indiana, was now famous. A few days later, Hall had a swastika painted on his P-40 to indicate that he had taken down an enemy plane, and he also had the words "Cool Papa" painted next to his name. Shortly after, Charles wrote a letter home to his mother and told her, "You may be reading about me." And he told her, "The flying is fine, but we are playing for keeps now." Hall's victory on July 2nd would prove to be the 99th Fighter Squadron's sole aerial victory in 1943. In January 1944, the 99th, then attached to the 79th Fighter Group, provided close air support for the 5th Army during assaults on Foggia and Anzio, and for the French and Polish armies at Cassino. On January 27th and 28th, German Luftwaffe FW-190 firebombers raided Anzio, where Allied troops had landed on January 22nd. Over the 2-day period, 8 fighter squadrons flying in defense of Anzio shot down 32 German aircraft, with the 99th Fighter Squadron claiming 12 of those planes. Charles Hall again made history on January 28th when he became the first of the 99th to shoot down 2 planes in one day. Charles was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions that day, another first for the American black combat fighter pilots. During his time overseas, Charles wrote to the people of Eastern Illinois Teachers College through the Eastern Teachers News, telling them about his service and providing an address for people to write to him. He wrote to them about a chance meeting in North Africa with Paul Henry, a fellow Eastern alum, the two having played halfback for the Eastern football team.
Have just received 2 copies of the news. It's quite a morale booster to get news of the people and places one knows. Glad to hear of Lieutenant Paul Henry's return to the States. I was acquainted with his outfit over here. They did a swell job. Henry and I met in North Africa and Sicily. Glad to hear of so many of Eastern's men in service, doing so well. At present, I have 55 missions over enemy territory. Thanks so much for the news. It's one of the greatest things I look forward to.
There are a number of people of renown whose accomplishments reflect very well on Eastern Illinois University. But the legacy of Charles B. Hall, the way in which he and his fellow Tuskegee Airmen blasted away every single stereotype, criticism, and complaint leveled against them, and with Charles's own personal trailblazing and astounding military record, which has national and global significance, what does his legacy mean to Eastern Illinois University?
I think his legacy, I think, tells everyone that you can start here at Eastern Illinois University and go anywhere and achieve any goal that you set your mind towards. I think he is definitely a role model for our current students, even those that don't even know who he is as of right now. But I really believe he left a legacy here at the institution that you can come here, you can excel, and you can go on to achieve whatever you put your mind towards. And I think that's what his legacy is, his lasting legacy.
Charles flew 89 sorties and 108 missions. He was one of 9 of the Tuskegee Airmen to have 3 or more kills. In recalling Charles Hall as a pilot, the 99th Second Commanding Officer, then Captain George S. Roberts, said, "Buster had one problem, if it could be considered as such. He was totally without fear." Charles B. Hall earned the rank of captain, an Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the equivalent of 3 Air Medals for meritorious achievement, and the Distinguished Flying Cross. In April 1944, Charles Hall and several other men of the 99th were sent back to the States, where they embarked on a 105-day war bond tour. Charles Hall traveled the United States, speaking to large and small crowds, accepting keys to cities, taking part in parades. He met with church groups, visited students at school, visited military bases, and he even spoke to a capacity crowd at Madison Square Garden in New York. Charles was always the main attraction and hero wherever he went. But Charles was not a man without humor. After many narrow escapes in combat where he was absolutely fearless, Charles later told a reporter that while he felt absolutely no fear in combat, not ever, talking to those crowds of people was scary. While Charles was in Washington, D.C., he met with 4 Eastern Illinois teachers, college men, who were on leave from the university and doing war work in Washington. A photo of Charles Hall with Dr. Charles Coleman, P.H. Kinzel, Lieutenant Roy Wilson, and Lieutenant Commander Howard Gibbs was published in newspapers with the headline, "5 IETC Men Meet in Washington." After the war bond tour ended, Charles Hall returned to Tuskegee to train upcoming pilots. There he was reunited with Colonel Noel Parrish, the commanding officer at Tuskegee. At Tuskegee, Charles Hall finally received his Distinguished Flying Cross that he had been awarded earlier. It was presented to him by Colonel Parrish. In February 1946, Charles Hall separated from the Army by honorable relief from active duty with the rank of captain. He continued to serve with the U.S. Army Reserves until 1958, when he retired from the military with the rank of major. In 1949, Charles Hall began working as a production scheduling specialist at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. He remained at Tinker until 1967, at which time he was ticketed over to work with the FAA as a maintenance supervisor. In March of 1971, Charles Hall was diagnosed with lung cancer. He passed away on November 22, 1971. He was just 51 years old. On June 18, 2002, the Tinker Air Base Air Park was renamed the Charles B. Hall Air Park in honor of Major Hall. An 8-foot bronze statue of Major Hall is the highlight of the air park.
I think a patriot for the community and excelling for what the country needed at the time. There's an opportunity and a time, and he excelled at it. And I think that's why he's recognized, is because of his exceptional talent and skill, and he rescued people. The fighter pilots were awesome in that aspect. You know, they turned around and gave carrier supports to the other operations. So when he called for help, he said, "I'll be there."
As far as Brazil, I think today we very much recognize him as being somebody that we're very proud of here in Brazil. Even a student of history and studies World War II would be very proud of the achievements that Charles B. Hall did here in Brazil, in Clay County.
This documentary or this film right now is a great way to be, you know, him to be remembered as the individual that has done so many great things in life. But I also think we need to have something on campus. A statue, a memorial, some form of a plaque where people that are visiting the institution can actually see the marker or the statue, and it can tell the story of Charles Blakesly Hall and his time here at Eastern Illinois University, as well as his accomplishments when he left the institution.
It was not until the mid-1990s that the United States collectively began to take notice of the accomplishments of the men of the 99th, the 332nd Fighter Group, and the 477th Bombardment Group. It was this belated attention and appreciation that cemented the term Tuskegee Airmen. All of the men of the 99th, 332nd, and 477th were courageous, they were trailblazers, and they were heroes. And we hold them in the highest esteem. But Charles Blakesly Hall passed away before the Tuskegee Airmen began receiving their well-deserved recognition. We celebrate this remarkable young man who touched our community briefly, and we honor his memory, his courage, and his trailblazing accomplishments.
Fearless, Charles Blakesly Hall, on WEIU TV, is supported by the Southeastern Illinois Community Foundation and the Lumpkin Family Foundation.